On the show today, what could be the effects of a lockdown for our country? How are we to avoid it if it's possible to avoid it? We also talk, why is Africa poor? Our business myth or fact talks to Walter Mwambazi, and we'll get to find out. This is Strictly Business. I am Judy Ngulube.
History is the foundation of which cultures are shaped. Zambia's history has continued to make a mark on both international and local levels.
Kanshiri have been center of activities.
It is this history that has been passed on from the forefathers to the younger generation. It is a story worth telling.
An important piece of infrastructure.
So join me, Chileshe Malungila, as I take you down memory lane on Minutes in History, only on ZNBC.
According to Reuters, Zambia currently owes about 3.5 billion United States dollars in bilateral debt, 2.1 in multilateral debt, and 2.9 billion United States dollars in other commercial lendings. Now, with these figures, a lockdown would mean a lot of trouble. But can we avoid this? We engage economist Shabdeen Mweemba via phone to find out exactly how this is possible. So, Mr. Mweemba, there's a few figures I was talking about just before we came on air with you. Issues of Zambia having some debt and being in an economic situation we're in right now. If we had to get a lockdown, what does that mean for our country?
Well, thank you for connecting me. I think for now, if it is a time that we needed, for example, more export, it's this time because our culture is experiencing a lot of pressure. That's the reason why it has lost value. For example, as of today, a dollar is costing over 21 kwacha. So if there's such a time that we needed to export is now, and for sure we cannot really afford to go in the phase of lockdown, bearing in mind that we have this weakening kwacha, and on the other hand, as I've mentioned, we have also some debt obligations that we need to to settle. So we are really in a tricky situation as a country.
So if we had to avoid this, knowing that the second wave of COVID-19 is upon us, what are some of the economic sectors or indicators we're supposed to be really focusing on to make sure that there is not lockdown looming anywhere near, in the near future?
I think there's a need to work hand in hand. For example, the department or the ministry responsible for economic matters, there's need to work hand in hand with the Ministry of Health, because no matter what plans that you may put in place, if, for example, the cases are just skyrocketing, then of course the Ministry of Health may be forced to do a lockdown. I think there's need to work together with the Ministry of Health, so that people are encouraged to adhere to the health regulations. And on the other hand, also there's also need to integrate the efforts, for example, in the SADC region. As you know, that Zambia is a landlocked country, and because lockdown can be triggered in two ways. The first way is where our neighbors may lock their countries, and that may mean that we'll be locked inside here, we'll not be able to export. And then the other angle is where, as a country, we may decide to lock ourselves, thereby, affecting import and exporting. So they just need this message of adhering to health regulations, what our health experts are advising us. That's the way to go. Because no matter what good plans that we may put in place, but if you are not adhering to this, it means that we may find ourselves, in a lockdown situation.
Okay.
which cannot be good for us as a country.
All right. You're talking of imports and exports, Mr. Mweemba. To what extent can the manufacturing industry be hit? Issues of foreign direct investments, issues of Zambia at this point, trying to maximize local products hitting the international market?
Yeah, how the manufacturing sector can be hit. As you know, that there are two ways. There are some manufacturing companies that do export, for example, their raw materials, so do import their raw materials, for them to be able to export. So, in a situation where we're in a lockdown, it means that they'll not be able to import that raw material that is needed as an input for them to be able to export. Then also on the non-traditional exports, of for example, farm produce and the like. So it may also mean that we may not be able to export as a country. And as I said earlier on, to say that this is the time actually that we need forex, because you strengthen the currency, or we can strengthen the kwacha by exporting. That's the only way you can, strengthen. That's the main way of strengthening the currency.
Okay.
So the affected export may mean that our currency or our kwacha will continue weakening. So it can actually affect them to that great extent. Except that maybe now, due to the fact that people have businesses have gone now like e-business, where you don't necessarily need to actually go there yourself. You can actually trade online. But despite that, even that also, it may also affect in the sense that those goods, they need to go out. And,
very true. All right.
Yeah, so...
Mr. Mweemba, appreciate you coming through and just chatting with us on the issues of to which extent our country can be affected if a lockdown did come down, and which ones we should, which areas we should be concentrating. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
The continent, the fact that we're able to attract investment, there's actually a second gold rush.
Which of the foreign ministers? Which of the foreign ministers would you marry, get into business with, have as a guest for dinner at your house? So let's start. Whom would you marry first amongst the three?
My wife is watching. That was very easy.
I would marry that one.
After 9, a late night cocktail of current affairs, business, and everything in between. Less with humor. After 9 with Brian Mulamba. Good TV taking you to bed. Exclusive to TV1. You are watching Strictly Business. A lot of times we hear theories of why Africa is poor. Now, Walter Mwambazi has had a series of something similar on his prosperity insights. Let's chat with him to just get to understand more of this and try to see why Africa is poor. Reverend Walter Mwambazi, how are you?
I'm very well, Madam Judy, and I'm very glad to be on the call.
All right, I appreciate you coming through as well. Now, the issue of Africa being poor, what is that all about? Everyone has got a theory on that one, but for you, what is it?
Well, for me, it's a very complex series of factors and issues that have brought us to where we are. And really, in order to understand where we are, it is critical that we do a self-examination. As the saying goes, unless one looks to the past, they will never understand where they are today. And until one takes a critical look of where they are today, can they then be in a position to formulate a strategy to get them where they need to go. So an examination of the past, an examination of all the issues and the factors that are leading to the quote-unquote poverty in Africa must then be critically looked at. And when you look at Africa, we are an oxymoron because we have the greatest amount of resources the world has ever seen. This continent has everything in maximum numbers, but yet the citizens of this continent are dirt poor. We have 16 of the 20 poorest countries in the world residing in Africa.
So
that should mean there's a problem somewhere.
Could this be an issue of mindset? Because I hear the issue of mindset popping up a lot in such discussions. And how is it affecting our socio-economic development?
Well, the mindset is certainly a problem, because you must understand that when you look at Africa today, you realize that there's been a very strategic programming of the African citizens. And this programming is a multifaceted type of programming. It is what I term a systemic anomaly that has been pervading throughout history. And this has then put us in this mindset. Because remember, we are the results of what is around us. Whatever you have in your environment inevitably determines your behavior. So if there is no counter mind, or a counter culture, or a counter system to go against what the environment is pushing, then that is going to affect you. So the African mindset is actually coming as a result of a number of factors, chief of which is a mindset programming.
You mentioned history, and it reminds me, because I know it's been a series that you've been writing in your recent article, talking about the issue of our oppressors in history, having a part to play in this one. Now, aren't we just looking for excuses? Because that's what those issues were happening to our forefathers and not us.
Yes, it's very true that whenever you look at something like that, it looks like you're making excuses. But then, like I said earlier on, Judy, unless one learns from the past, they are bound to repeat it. In short, anyone who doesn't learn from history is bound to repeat it. We have to look at history, and we must critically examine history. And this is what we're doing. We're not making an excuse, but we're identifying the problem. The greatest challenge Africa faces when it comes to poverty, I've always summed it into 5. You've got poor governance and weak institutions. But these two, though foundational, sit on an even more powerful basis. The geography being the location, that's another issue which I won't discuss, but the last two are mind, and that is culture and religion. And religion can be counted as part of culture, but truth be told, religion has to be separated. And you realize that when you look at Africa, in the last 500 years, there's been 2 religions that have played a very big role, and that is Christian and Islam religion. Now, you have to study the people that brought those systems to us and their motives and intentions for doing so. And when you begin to look at that, then you realize that these people realized from a long time ago, especially amongst their thinkers, that the best way to conquer a people is not by guns and weapons, but by getting their mind, by capturing their mind. And so for the last 500 years, that's what's been going on. Now, why should this bother us? Because we are now a product of our environment. Remember, everything you see around you, Judy and viewers, comes from what we call modeling. Why is it that Jews are so successful wherever they go? The answer is simple. Because in their culture, in their upbringing, there is a model for success. They are raised to prosper.
But Rev, in the same environment, being, well, if you take the African continent, there's other countries that are more prosperous than others. Zeroing it into our country, Zambia, we have other entrepreneurs who are prospering more than others.
But you see, the truth of the matter, Judy, is prosperity means nothing if the majority of the citizens are suffering. It means absolutely jack. If you have a country like the Congo, where 70% of the coltan in the world is mined there, $24 trillion worth of minerals is sitting on the ground, and yet it is the 3rd poorest country in the world, there's a disconnect. That wealth is going to a very tiny minority, and the majority are suffering. That is injustice of the highest degree. If there's wealth in a country, it must go all around. Every citizen of that nation must experience the wealth of the country. So if your education is still bad, if your roads are still terrible, if your health care is seeing more than half your population dying before the age of 5, there's a problem somewhere, Judy. It means the leadership has failed.
With these issues that you've spoken about, and then cupping it all up with a poor attitude, that poor, I say in inverted commas, attitude, because it's not everybody across the board, poor attitude towards, seeing a developed nation come through, now comes in the second wave of COVID-19. Looks like development or getting to a first world nation is bleak.
I always disagree because for me, the foundation will always determine the ability for the building to stand. Even if it wasn't COVID-19, it would be something else. The truth of the matter is that if a nation sits, if a continent sits on a weak foundation, it doesn't matter what you build on top. When the storm comes, it will fall. But if the foundation is strong, even when a storm comes, the building will stand. Our challenge in Africa is twofold. We have very poor governance and we have very weak institutions. If you go before the advent of colonialism and before the advent of slave trade, you find very strong institutions that existed in our culture and in our background with our forefathers. And so the issue that needs to happen here is we need to get back to strong institutions and strong and powerful governance. But these can only happen when we deal with the mindset, because you and I know that the mindset is the greatest challenge. Take, for instance, corruption. It's a song in this country, right? But the truth of the matter is if you ask yourself deeply, where is this corruption? You are going to see that it's everywhere. It's very easy for people to point to leaders and say, it's the leaders. But the truth is it just the leaders? Those people are just a reflection of ourselves. So the truth of the matter is, why is there this quote-unquote endemic corruption? So we must look at it in a deeper way. And for me, it goes back to modeling, Judy. The model must change.
So issues of policies, strong governance, changing the mindset. But going forward, I keep hearing now something of issues of law of attraction. Are we turning to the universe to make our reality come from there then?
No, first we must deal with the programming. For me, I've always said the programming is where the mess is. So there's 7 specific keys, in my opinion, that must happen. The first one is we must take responsibility, because unless one accepts their role to be where they are, then you cannot progress. If you play the blame game, you go nowhere. So we must accept responsibility as Africans that we are partly at fault for where we are today. In fact, for me, to a huge extent, it is our fault. Then number 2, we must raise our standards. We cannot continue to live in mediocrity and think this is good. We talk about, in this country, somebody goes and buys a silver, what's it called? A gold silver? What is it? A Rolls Royce or something? Mm-hmm. And the whole social media is a buzz. Like, really? Seriously? So you realize
I'm going to have to rush you. You're number 2. Mention them real quick. I'm sure people are anxious. So number 1, number 2, number 3.
Number 3 is that after we raise our standard, we must change our beliefs. We have too much witchcraft, PhD, and all sorts of things going on. That has to go out. Number 4, we must then change our strategy. We've been doing the same thing and not seeing any changes. It's time we change that. Then number 3, we must start applying good governance. Number 6, we must strengthen institutions. And number 7, very important, we must also apply solid leadership. And the country, as well as the nation and the continent, will become first world in 20 years.
All right. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I had to rush you at the end there because of time. I appreciate you coming through. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
All right.
At times I say, culture, I'll find you. Sit there. Because I have got deadlines to meet, I've got a life to live.
Yeah. The way women are looked at, even here in our country, Zambia. What would be your comments on that?
They might, misunderstand. Yeah, they might think maybe you are a very irresponsible mother, you are a very irresponsible wife.
My son, fortunately, I can be able to get him a phone and he can be able to, follow lessons. But what about the child in the village, in the rural areas?
Amathion Agri Holding has this farming season introduced new agro products on its food chain with potential to create 4,000 jobs in the country. Now, the agro investor from Germany has introduced organic chili for the export market that is known as long cayenne chilies. Now, the company CEO, Carl Byrne, says that the firm continues to grow in Zambia and will engage 2,000 outgrowers this year. African Explosive Limited Zambia was the top performer last week on the Lusaka Stock Exchange after the local bourse opened in 2021 with an overall turnover valued at over 1.5 million kwacha of the total 1,514,716 value over turnover. Now, less than 1 million was shared among 10 companies that participated in the 103 trades on the local bourse. And for our business segment, looking at how small, medium entrepreneurs are doing in our country, Zambia records its first case of COVID-19 in March last year, which took very early action in terms of the spread. But the lowest income segments are particularly vulnerable in the economic impacts of the coronavirus, especially the second wave, and resulting into an economic slowdown. Now, to better understand the effects of the crisis, Financial Deepening Zambia and FBA Global teamed up to conduct a rapid online survey of micro and small enterprises. Now, a backbone of Zambia's economy, the SMEs are. This research now says that FSD Zambia's active engagement in its response to the COVID-19 crisis and replicates methodology of the FBA Global has actually leveraged over multiple waves to gain deep insights into 10 countries since the beginning of the pandemic. Now, this blog reports that the findings of the first wave of the survey were that 170 self-employed employees, merchants, and other micro and small entrepreneurs have polled between June 11th and 17th. 33% of the respondents were female and 67 were male. More than half were less than 30 years of age, mostly hailing from urban areas, which is amounting to 71%. And the rest were from peri-urban areas, resulting in 28%, and from the rural areas, 8%. So that is some of the news that is coming through. That's talking about how COVID-19 has affected small entrepreneurs. All right, and lastly, before we get to close strictly business, we take you to our money markets. We know that the kwacha is well over 21 kwacha. Let's get to our money markets. Now, the kwacha's trading against other foreign convertibles is giving us today that it's trading for the United States dollar. It's at 21 kwacha 0.2 and selling at 21 kwacha 0.3, and going to the Great British Pound, buying at 28 kwacha 0.9 and selling at 29 kwacha 0.0. And you get to the euro, buying at 25.7 kwacha and selling at 25.8 kwacha. And according to the other currency, which is the South African rand, it is buying at 1.3 kwacha and selling at 1.4 kwacha. So those are the exchange rates, and that is how our kwacha is performing against other foreign currencies. So that is what actually wraps up our show for today. Thank you so much for joining us. On behalf of the entire production crew, I'm Judin Guluve.
Zambia has always been home, a special place where something is always happening. And information must be shared with the peace-loving citizens. And after all this time, it still remains a privilege for us to deliver information to you. Appreciating our stories, our people, our way of life. The things that really matter to us. Here, our home Zambia. We are TV1, your national broadcaster, just for you.